For Eric J on Sports, I'm Eric J, and this is what I think. Everyone who knows me and follows me knows that I've been a professional wrestling fan for quite a long time. But recently, over the last few years, I've become a little bit disillusioned with professional wrestling on television. And the reason is because not every minute of every wrestling show is entertaining. So what I've taken to doing is I will read results of wrestling shows before I watch them. I'll DVR them and then read the results before I watch them, just to determine if watching the show is worth my time. If there's more things on the show that interest me than don't interest me, then I watch. If there's more stuff on the show that does not interest me than interests me, then I don't watch. It's as simple as that. I still know what's going on, but I don't waste the time actually watching the show. And when I read results of AEW shows, I typically hear from the reviewers that AEW attempts to cram too much content into their 2-hour shows, be it Dynamite or Rampage. Sometimes I agree, sometimes I disagree. But the point being, the reviewers of AEW shows seem to feel as if AEW attempts to cram too much into one show, considering the fact that they only have a pay-per-view once every 3 months, which means you have a lot of time and 4 hours of television each week, not to mention Dark and Dark Elevation, to establish storylines, to create stories, to bring stories along, and to continue stories so that by the time the pay-per-view hits, every story is piping hot, at its peak, and ready to explode. So I hear a lot that AEW attempts to cram too much into a 2-hour show, and after watching the March 9th, 2022 episode of AEW Dynamite, in this instance, I'm inclined to agree. There's an old saying that I tend to use a lot that says that if everything is urgent, then is anything really urgent? What that means is if you've got a lot of stuff going on and you want to say that everything is must see or everything is earth shattering and everything is critically important to the knowledge base of whoever you're passing it along, then is any of it really important? Because not everything can be a 10. Only one thing can be a 10 and everything else has to fall in behind it. If everything is a 10, then is anything really a 10? Case in point, AEW Dynamite on March 9th, 2022 opened with Chris Jericho coming out to essentially apologize for disrespecting Eddie Kingston, and in the process, he and Jack Hager turned heel and attacked Santana and Ortiz and seemingly aligned themselves with 2.0 and Daniel Garcia. Now, this one segment permanently dissolved the inner circle, or at least for the time being, sending Hager and Jericho one way, Santana and Ortiz the other way. Now Santana and Ortiz are aligned with Kingston, Jericho and Hager are aligned with Garcia and 2.0, even though Bryan Danielson had his eyes on Daniel Garcia for his own stable, and that was just the show opener. The inner circle dissolving, Chris Jericho and Jake Hager turning heel. The very next segment was a world title match. The first match of the show was a world title match, which led to a challenge from Adam Cole for a 6-man tag match against Adam Page at a later point. Now, coming off of a hot pay-per-view where Page and Cole had a match for the ages, if you will, couldn't they have achieved this with just a conversation and not necessarily having Page defend the title again 3 days after he defended it before? The reason I mention this will become clearer later, but they opened the show with a world title match that led to the creation of a 6-man tag match, which of course is going to lead to another world title match down the line. Then there was Bryan Danielson and Jon Moxley, who tore each other to shreds at the pay-per-view Sunday, becoming a tag team being led by William Regal. The next segment showed Adam Page having a conversation with John Silver of the Dark Order and telling Dark Order that Page had selected Jurassic Express to be his tag partners in the 6-man against Cole, knowing that Cole is either going to choose the Young Bucks or Red Dragon, and both of those teams were just in a world tag title match. Page tells Silver that he's choosing not members of the Dark Order, but Jurassic Express, which is hinting at a separation between Page and the Dark Order, which is followed by a conversation in the back where the Young Bucks tell Adam Cole they have no interest in Adam Cole's issues with Adam Page, and Page telling the Bucks, well, that's okay, I was going to choose Red Dragon anyway, hinting at further dissolution between the Bucks and Cole. And then right behind that, FTR comes out with a segment with Tully Blanchard discussing the World Tag Titles because everybody else is discussing the World Tag Team titles. But in the process of discussing FTR's desire to be tag champions, they fire Tully Blanchard as their manager, telling him he's no longer family. They fire him. And right behind that, Matt Hardy gets kicked out of the faction that he formed, the AHFO. Matt Hardy gets kicked out and beat up by his faction mates, only to be saved by Darby Allin and Sting, and then the debuting Jeff Hardy. So you've got Matt Hardy getting kicked out of his faction, beaten up by his faction, and his brother debuting all in the same segment, and Matt Hardy seemingly turning to a babyface, all in the same segment. And right behind that segment, you get a conversation with Wardlow where he turns to a babyface, which makes it the third turn in the same one show. Maybe the fourth if you count Hager, maybe the fifth if you count Tully Blanchard if he's going to go to the other side. Because Wardlow becomes a babyface and tells the world he's no longer a member of the Pinnacle. And then, right behind that, you get a tag title match, which is not a big deal because AEW shows title matches on their shows all the time. But you get a tag title match with Jurassic Express facing the top-seeded Acclaimed. This is the Acclaimed's title shot as being the number one contender, and it's kind of a throw-in behind all that other stuff that's already happened in the first hour of the show. So their match is kind of an afterthought, and the result is an afterthought, because even though they're the number one contenders, so much other stuff has happened that this match is the rest match for the show. This is the go get popcorn match. This is the if you need to go use the bathroom, go during this match segment. And then right behind that, you get a match between the top two women's contenders for the titles, where Layla Hirsch faces Thunder Rosa. Thunder Rosa defeats Layla Hirsch, only to find out at the end of the match that Thunder Rosa's match against Britt Baker for the title is going to be a cage match. So just like with Adam Page and Adam Cole, could they not have achieved this with a conversation? Have Thunder Rosa come to the ring and be interviewed by Tony Schiavone, and then have Tony Schiavone announce, okay, you're going to have a cage match. Or have Britt Baker come to the ring and be interviewed by Tony Schiavone, and have Tony Schiavone tell Britt Baker, his best buddy, oh, I just found out Tony Khan is saying your match against Thunder Rosa is going to be a cage match, and then Britt Baker throws a hissy fit. You probably didn't need a match right there. And you probably didn't need to put a blemish on the undefeated record of top contender Layla Hirsch to get to that point. Because going into that match, Layla Hirsch was 6-0. So now you put a blemish on her record. She's no longer the number one contender. Thunder Rosa is the number one contender, getting a title rematch from the pay-per-view where everybody got involved in their match. And now you got a match that's going to be a cage match. And you could have made this same announcement without having Layla Hirsch be hurt in the process. And then in the final segment of this show, Sammy Guevara comes to the ring, still wearing his Inner Circle vest. After Jericho and Hager threw theirs to the ground, Sammy is still wearing his Inner Circle vest, coming out to defend his title against Scorpio Sky. And the fact that he's still wearing his vest is one story. But through the course of the match itself set in motion the feud between Ty Conte, Sammy Guevara's girlfriend, and Paige Van Zant, a stablemate of Scorpio Sky with America's Top Team and Dan Lambert. And then through the course of the match, because of all the interference of Ethan Page and Dan Lambert and Paige Van Zant and everybody interfering in this match, based on the fact that Sammy Guevara no longer has backup because the Inner Circle doesn't exist anymore, Scorpio Sky, spoiler alert, becomes the new TNT champion, leaving Sammy with a beat-up girlfriend, no stable, and no title. All in one night. Now, taken individually, each of these segments would be important. Taken individually, each of these segments would be newsworthy, and each of these segments would require the announcers to sit back and go, what did I just see? What did we just hear? What's going on? This is big. But when you pile them all into a single show, you've got 3 title matches, a number one contenders match, 3 or 4 turns all at once, Tully Blanchard getting fired from his faction, Matt Hardy's faction turning on him, the Inner Circle breaks up, AHFO is restructured, Tully Blanchard is kicked out of the Pinnacle. Wardlow kicks himself out of the Pinnacle. Sammy loses his title. Paige Van Zandt debuts on TV. William Regal debuts on TV. Jeff Hardy debuts on TV. All this stuff happens all in the same night in a 2-hour show. Then yeah, I agree that maybe AEW is doing too much in a single show. Keeping in mind that, as I said, they've got another 2 hours 2 days later, and they don't have a pay-per-view for 3 months. They did their pay-per-view Sunday, March 6th, and their next pay-per-view is not until June. So they had plenty of time to set the stage for all of these things. And I know that the TNT title is a title that they like to defend on TV every week. So they could have saved the world title match for Friday. They could have saved the tag title match for another time because there was no actual story that came out of that tag title match. They could have saved that for another time. They could have used promo segments or interview segments for the Adam Cole, Adam Page bit, for the Thunder Rosa, Britt Baker bit, and they could have opened with Jericho turning heel and dissolving the Inner Circle, and then closed with Sammy losing his title, which seems to be a result of the fact that the Inner Circle no longer exists. And then some of that other stuff could have been held over for another time, just to give people a chance to marinate on the fact that Chris Jericho turned heel, dissolved the Inner Circle, and how's that going to affect Santana and Ortiz in Kingston? Is Jericho really aligned with Daniel Garcia in 2.0? And Sammy has a title match at the end of the show. What's going to be his thoughts? And maybe they interview Sammy before his match and say, Sammy, what are your thoughts on this? And that actually never happened during the show. So AEW needs to learn some restraint. They need to learn to reel themselves in. Sometimes you just need to learn control. This show, though good, seemed a little bit out of control. You need to dial it back a little bit. You need to restrain yourself. You need to save some stuff for later, knowing that you have time. You're not doing a pay-per-view every month like WWE. So you can dial some of this stuff back and put some of this stuff on the back burner until the following week, because you've got so many other things you're trying to get to. And the only other segment that seemed nonsensical, based on the fact that the show was so full, the segment between Keith Lee and QT Marshall didn't even seem to matter. Keith Lee had a confrontation with QT Marshall, and that segment was unimportant because of all the other newsworthy segments on the show. So your newly debuted Keith Lee is being pushed to the back burner. He'll elevate later, but for right now, with all the other urgent top stories, Keith Lee's segment seemingly didn't exist. And that segment should have gotten some traction on its own. So AEW, learn some restraint. Realize that you do have 3 months between pay-per-views and you just had one. And the shows will be that much better because you can actually marinate on some of the stories and then do some of the stories in the following show. Remember to like and share this video and subscribe to this channel, and follow me on Facebook at Eric J on Sports 1 and on Instagram and Twitter at Eric J on Sports. And for Eric J on Sports, I'm Eric J, and this is what I think.